everyone. In this video, I'm going to talk about my experience of having done ayahuasca, which was about a year or so ago. Yeah, a year ago, I basically took this thing called ayahuasca, which is a really strong psychedelic. You get it in this tea form, or this small liquid form, and you kind of do like a shot of it. And basically, at that particular time, I felt like I needed to do it, and so that's why I did it. I feel a bit weird talking about it in a way because it was a long time ago, but it's a strange thing, I suppose, to talk about. It's a strange thing to have undertaken, and a strange thing to be vulnerable about in this kind of setting. But I'm doing it because a friend of my sister's has requested that he was interested in this, and also I just always kind of wanted to do a video about this anyway, and so I think now kind of felt like the right time. Coupled with that, I think that I've kind of processed what I'd experienced as I'd done it about a year on now, which it's been a bit more than a year, so I've kind of processed that whole thing now, so I think I'm kind of at a place where I can begin to talk about it. Of course, I would say that if you're going to do this, go and do it with the proper people, have a reference, blah blah blah. People are going and doing it in Peru, and I think I would say that's kind of my recommendation. I don't know. But anyway, my point is just be responsible. Don't just do it because you think it will be just interesting or something like that. It's a serious thing, and at least I think it's a serious thing. So the people you'd kind of find there have gone through quite a few things, or often people kind of find themselves doing this at a time when they feel lost, or they feel unsure of themselves, or they want to make sense of some kind of deep lingering trauma which they've had in their lives. And so it's kind of a serious thing. It's not just something which you take for fun or anything like that, and I think you should be responsible with that. So that's kind of my first disclaimer regarding it, that it's a big thing. It's not fun. It's the opposite of fun in many ways, because what happens is when you kind of take this brew, you're going to have a lot of lingering trauma, and I think everyone's carrying some kind of trauma come up, and what you would have in that particular moment is that you'd have to kind of make sense of that whole situation, you know, during that period when you're under the influence of it. And so it's not a fun thing. It's a serious thing, and I do think it can have benefits, but there are a few caveats to that which I'm going to discuss in this video as well. So yeah, that's my experience with ayahuasca, at least just what I think that my disclaimer regarding it would be anyway. So what was it actually which kind of led me to do this, and also what was my experience like regarding it? So what I'd done, and I think there's a kind of undertone here which I need to explain first, is that I kind of was at a position in my life where I felt that I was lost, I wasn't really sure of myself, and I'd felt that kind of my existing paradigm, or my existing way of thinking, of making sense of the world, had kind of collapsed due to a multitude of reasons. Externally speaking, it didn't really feel like a big deal to someone who was observing me from the outside. Kind of had a good job, I was fine, I was functioning well, but internally I kind of felt that I couldn't really make sense of the world anymore, and I felt desperate for some kind of guidance. And so I did it from that place of seeking guidance, because before doing this, I'd meditated a lot, I'd contemplated a lot of these things, and I kind of felt like that my meditation had hit a block, and so I couldn't go any further. And so I kind of needed this intervention, and it was calling me, and somehow I ended up in circumstances which led me to do this. And I think in a way it was a beautiful thing I did it, but I also think that at that particular time I felt like I needed to do it, and a year on, I think it would be really easy to say, a year on basically, you could just say like, it's changed my life, everything's different because of it, or something dramatic like that, but I just don't think that's the case for me. It may be the case for some people, it's not the case for me. I don't know what my life would be like if I hadn't done it. I think maybe I'll be in a different position, maybe I won't be in a different position. It's just so hard to make that judgment, because there's so many other variables which shift in your life as well. And so there can be an element of like, well, I did that, and so because I want to get something out of it, I really want to double down on this idea that it was really, really beneficial to me. Whereas maybe if you didn't do it, you would have been okay as well, you know. So at that time I felt it was essential, but I don't know in retrospect if it was or was not essential. All I can say is that I did it, and it gave me some insight to some aspects of my psyche and myself, which I found incredibly useful and rewarding to kind of come to terms with. But maybe that stuff would have happened anyway, you know, because I think there was at that time for me a lack of self-acceptance, and that was the thing which was causing me to get drawn into this thing, because I couldn't accept myself as I was. I wanted to be someone who was different to who I was, and that was the thing which was driving me to kind of go towards this thing. And because I didn't accept myself for who I was, I think if I'd somehow come across some kind of other tool or some kind of other circumstance, which I have now in retrospect, which had led me or allowed me to see that I can accept myself for who I am, and that's fine, then actually maybe I wouldn't have had to do this thing, and I would have fared a lot better as well. I don't know, because I think when I did it, there was an element of I don't want to accept myself as I am. I didn't want to accept the pain I was carrying or the trauma I was carrying, and I kind of wanted ayahuasca to just kind of remove it, to almost wipe the board clean or something like that. And I think now, honestly, a year in, I'm still kind of wanting to do that a little bit. There's an aspect of myself which still wants to do that. Just gonna pause there and check if it's recording. And just one sec. Yeah, it's recording. So I think there was an element of me not accepting myself, and a year in now even, I think there's an aspect of that which is still lingering in me. And to be honest with you, ayahuasca didn't fix that. Ayahuasca showed me some things. It brought up my high school trauma, so I'd like been in high school, and at that time I had moved countries, and for that particular period, so I moved from Pakistan to Britain into high school, which wasn't that great. And so there was some bullying there, and there was also just a general sense of isolation which had occurred during that particular period. And to be honest, I just repressed all of those feelings. I couldn't even access them when I'd meditated. So when I did ayahuasca, those feelings came up, and that was quite hard. It was a difficult night, and then I kind of went through a couple of more ceremonies, and a similar kind of trauma came up, or like it deepened. Whatever insight came up in the first ceremony, second and third kind of deepened that particular insight. But to be honest, I think if I hadn't done that, I may have come across those things anyway, just because I was placed in a position where I was working with lots of different people in a setting which was an office environment, seeing the same people again and again, and that was bringing up high school kind of feelings, or the feelings I'd had at high school trauma, if you want to call it that. I started seeing someone. Now, I'd previously thought that if I hadn't done ayahuasca, maybe I wouldn't have had the courage to ask this person out, but who knows, I've asked people out before, and because there was a sense of connection there, this time it stuck. So maybe if I hadn't done it, I may have been less courageous initially, but eventually I would have been more courageous, and maybe some of the kind of tumultuous elements of emotions which I'd experienced at the start would have been a bit more grounded. Who knows, you know? So like, my experience with it was such that I didn't think it was something which was essential in my life. I don't think it was essential, and I don't know if I'm someone who can say that or make a comment on if it's essential in any other person's life or not, because I think every person is very different. But I think for me, doing ayahuasca was just coming from an element of not accepting myself as I am. And to be honest, after having done 3 ceremonies where things were tied in quite nicely in a way, it still led me to feel that I still have to accept myself for who I am, and ayahuasca didn't help me with that. Only I can help myself with that, which kind of brings me to think that there can be an element of wanting to, at least in me, have or use a psychedelic, whether it's ayahuasca or whether it's some kind of other thing like LSD or something like psilocybin. You kind of want to use the ayahuasca, psychedelic. We're talking about ayahuasca, so we're just focused on that, to almost like heal you or wipe the slate clean or something like that, where you're this fresh new person and no suffering is going to touch you now, because you can just kind of just deal with it because you don't have any baggage. And I just don't think it works like that. I think ayahuasca or any other psychedelic, what's going to give you is what meditation gives you, which is it highlights something which you need to work on. And so ayahuasca for me is that it's going to highlight something which you need to work on. And it's not going to highlight everything you need to work on. It's going to highlight one particular theme which you may need to work on. And that particular theme which it's going to highlight is a theme which the world is going to highlight for you as well, I think. I just don't think that ayahuasca is the only thing which is going to highlight that for you. If you are out and about in the world will tell you that this is something which you need to work on. So you don't necessarily need a psychedelic to tell you that, you know. So that's my kind of perspective on it. I know that's kind of a bit crap or a bit shit, because ideally if you want to ask someone who's done ayahuasca, and there's so many stories of now people going and doing this thing, they'll tell, a lot of the time the stories are it's life changing, it changes you completely, you have a new perspective on everything. And for me, it wasn't that. I think it was just a case of it allowed something to surface, which I think may have surfaced anyway. And so yeah, I think a couple of £100 lost kind of in that sense. If you, I don't really care, but down the drain, I suppose, you kind of think, well, was it really needed? And I don't think it was. I think for me, at least personally, it was just a case of being kinder to myself and more accepting of myself. And that's something which I've learned from my life. Ayahuasca prompted me to do that, but there were also darker elements during the ceremonies which kind of led me to critique myself even more, and kind of misunderstood some certain aspects of myself or diminished certain aspects of myself. So I think it's really about being honest with yourself and seeing if you actually need to do this thing, and recognizing that if you do want to do this thing, knowing that what it's going to give you is a prompt towards something which you may need to work on. And that's really it. I think for me, that element which people say that it has this healing property, where it's going to completely transform you, maybe, but maybe not. Maybe in people who experience this, there may be an element of kind of wanting to double down on the fact that you've gone through this and it means something to you. And maybe you do have a realization which you wouldn't have had otherwise. Or maybe you would have had that realization. I don't know. I think if you are open enough to the world around you, if you're open enough to the messages and your lived experience day to day, then the messages which you may receive from ayahuasca are the messages which you receive anyway. So from my perspective, I don't think it's essential. I think at best it can be something which may supplement your introspective process overall, and that's really it. It's not a magic pill, and I don't think it's as essential as some people may make it out to be. I think what is essential is being open to learning new things about yourself and willing to evolve and shift and be kinder and more generous as a person. But I don't think you necessarily need a psychedelic for that. I think all you need for that is an open heart. Now the argument could be made that, I was going to say that the argument could be made that basically ayahuasca is the thing which leads you to have that, but that I just don't think is the case. I think what leads you to have an open heart, a kind heart, a good heart, is yourself, and certain things can prompt that, like meditation or psychedelics, but in the end, you're the person who has to live your life day by day, moment by moment, and no psychedelic or journey is gonna completely shift that, you know. You have to kind of be with yourself and generous to yourself and other people around you. And that's the thing which is going to transform your life and maybe the life of other people around you. It's not a psychedelic or something else, you know. So that's my particular perspective on it. I know it's not the most popular perspective, but that is, for me at the moment, that's the honest truth which I have regarding ayahuasca. And so yeah, that's that. I mean, that if you want to go and do it, maybe that sounds very hopeless, but it's not. My point is that you have the strength and the capacity to do it without necessarily the aid of a psychedelic. If you want to use the aid of a psychedelic, great, go for it. If you want to use the aid of something else, go for it. But you don't need it. You don't essentially need it. It's not an essential component for you feeling good about yourself or about your life or having an open, kind heart or having a generous heart. You can do that. And you are the person, even after you do psychedelics, who's going to have to do that. And that's kind of my kind of take-home message, if you want to call it, from this particular video. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.